Welcome back. Now, before I read my poem, I'll admit that after reading these poems to you, Daniel and I run the risk, as the English department of Avondale, of looking very unserious. So we'd like to assure you that when we need to be, we are as serious as a Cooranbong storm. I'm going to read you 2 odes tonight. An ode is a lyric address to a subject of great value. You can be the judge of whether I'm being sarcastic or not. I have 2 odes to domesticity. An ode to the unbeautiful, an ode to the laundry. There are 11 socks at the bottom of this basket and none of them match. A note came through the wash, almost intact. It says, "I'll meet you there at 5 p.m. Don't forget your..." The AirPods have been tumble-dried again, and the sound from one of them is arthritic and temperamental. There was a pen stuck in the corner of the dryer. It grabbed the cord from a hoodie and wrapped it 12 times around a lace bra that should have been hand-washed. A very expensive polyamory. A fitted sheet has stolen all of the underwear, and a $2 coin has lodged itself alongside the filter, refusing to take credit for 2 hours of drum solo. None of the clean laundry is a towel. All of it is déjà vu. An ode to an 18-year-old boy. I was just wondering, he says, if you feel like ordering Uber Eats. I'm just in the mood for pho. He stretches his calf muscles while he stands there. Absolutely not, I say. There is pasta downstairs, and I don't feel like paying $40 for a bowl of broth. I'm trying to write a poem, and this interaction is not lyrical. Delicious, sophisticated broth, he says, more delicious than that downstairs peasant pasta. What if I walk the dog? He drinks from the water bottle I keep by my bed, leaving it empty. A dog walk, I sigh, is not worth $40. You must eat the pasta and you must like it. What rhymes with asinine? I Google. I will eat it, he says, lying on my floor and doing crunches, but I will be disappointed in it and in you. I do not care, I say, turning away. I am a poet.
This is a rare treat, the Lounsbury 1-2 punch. On the morning of November 29th, 1866, in the Yorkshire village of Middlesmore, a letter found its way to the home of one Mary Foster, sent by a local farmer named Simon Fallowfeld, proposing marriage. This is that letter. My dear miss, I now take up pen to write to you, hoping these few lines will find you well as it leaves me at present. Thank God for it. You will perhaps be surprised that I should make so bold as to write to you, such a lady, and I hope you will not be vexed at me for it. I hardly dare say what I want. I'm so timid about ladies. My heart trembles like a hespin. But once I seed in a book that faint heart never won fair lady. So here goes. I'm a farmer, in a small way, and my age is rather more than 40 years. And my mother lives with me and keeps me house. And she's been very poorly lately and cannot stir about much. And I think I should be more comfortable with a wife. I've had my eye on you for a long time. And I think you're a very nice young woman, and one that would make me happy if you only think so. We keep a servant girl to milk 3 cows and do the work in the house. She goes on a bit in the summer to gather wickens, and she snags a few turnips in the back kend. I do a piece of work on the farm myself, and attends Pateley Market. I sometimes show a few sheep. And I feeds between 2 and 3 pigs again Christmas, and the same is very useful in the house to make pies and cakes and so forth. And I sell the hams to help pay for the barley meal. I have about £73 in Naysborough Bank. We have a nice little parlour downstairs with blue carpet and an oven on the side of the fireplace and the old woman on the other side smoking. The golden rules claimed up on the wall above the settle, and you could sit all day in the easy chair and knit and mend my kittles and leggums. And you could make the tea ready again I come in. And you could make butter for Pateley Market. And I would drive you to church every Sunday in the spring cart, and I would do all that be's in my power to make you happy. So I hope to hear from you. I'm in desperate and earnest, and I will marry you at May Day. Or if my mother dies afore, I shall want you afore. If only you will accept of me, my dear, we could be very happy together. I hope you will let me know your mind by return of post, and if you are favourable, I will come up to scratch. So no more at present from your well-wisher and true love, Simon Fallowfield. P.S. I hope you will say nothing about this. If you will not accept of me, I have another very nice woman in my eye. And I think I shall marry her if you do not accept of me. But I thought you would suit me mother better, she being very crusty at times.
For the purpose of context, my story is set in a district called Branch Creek, which is about 360 kilometres northwest of Brisbane. And the incident that is explored in the narrative occurred at a time when Branch Creek was very much in the bush. Tonight I will be telling the story as well as reading a couple of passages. My story, Behind the Kitchen Door, begins with this single sentence. In the sultry darkness before dawn, my mother woke thinking about bushrangers and snakes. The reason why she was thinking about snakes was that she had recently brought me home as a baby to a cottage near the cowshed on a farm that was owned by Uncle Charlie and Auntie Lissy. She was really very, very frightened of snakes. And she grew up in New Zealand, and she never ever overcame her fear of snakes. And she was wondering how on earth she was going to cope with an infant and two small children in a place where snakes were everywhere. She had grown up in New Zealand, and she never ever, ever overcame her fear of snakes. And here they were. Deadly brown snakes, red-bellied black snakes, death adders, pythons, you name it, they were there. Apart from that, there was no running water to the cottage and certainly no electricity. The toilet was a pan-type dunny up there in the long grass, if you excuse my saying, and the laundry was a boiler and a wash tub without any taps under a pepperina tree. The clothesline was a piece of wire strung between two trees. My mother's reflections on bushrangers had been prompted by a story that had been doing the rounds in the district in the last couple of days. Fred Bassinger had passed it on to my father, and my father had relayed it to my mother the previous evening as he sat at the table cutting bits out of the Sunday Mail in the light of the kerosene lamp. Apparently, Gladys Wyborg's thick-built son Gregory had taken a fancy to tales about Ned Kelly and thought that it would be a bit of a lark to stage a hold-up himself. His mother was peeling chunks of pumpkin in the kitchen when he hauled himself into some old clothes that had been mouldering in a suitcase under the house and smeared his face with boot polish. With a squashed felt hat pulled over his eyes, he thumped up the long stairs, banged on the door, took on a voice and demanded money. Gladys greeted him with a gun, straight in the chest. Fred Bassinger had told my father that if young Wyborg had not yanked off his hat and yelled that he was Greg, he was Greg. Gladys would have put a shot into him, no questions asked. According to Fred, she was fairly dangerous even without a gun. In Branch Creek at that time, most of the farmers had a gun. My father had a Boer rifle that he kept behind the kitchen door. It was also fairly common for farmers' wives like Gladys to be quite handy with a gun. My mother would ultimately learn to shoot, and she became known as what was called a crack shot. Deadly accurate. But that's another story. In this story tonight, basically my father took time to give her instruction on how to operate a Boer rifle. The barrel had been rebored to take cartridges, 12-gauge cartridges, that were honestly that round and that long and red. He showed her how to put a cartridge in the breech and shut it. He told her that she must keep the butt of the gun against her shoulder and shut one eye to aim at a target. So she practiced, had another practice, and then something was said about a tin being set up on a post so that she could actually practice hitting things properly. But of course, that never happened because the baby was crying and the nappies needed to be brought in from the line. So the cartridge was put back in the box and the box was put on a high shelf up there. The snake that made its visitation to the cottage by the cowshed in my very first summer was brown. I was safely in the bassinet and my brother and sister were playing in this room that opened onto the veranda when my mother saw its long, lithe form at the bottom of the stairs. She turned cold. She grabbed my brother, threw him into the cot and said, "Do not move and do not get out." She grabbed my sister and threw her in as well, and then she raced into the kitchen, grabbed the gun, grabbed the cartridges, red explosives rolling across the table. She seized one, put it into the breech, slammed it shut, and raced back out to the front. By this stage, the snake was at the top of the stairs and coming onto the veranda. My mother put the gun against her shoulder and with her hand and put her finger on the trigger. And then unbelievably, she shut her eyes and she said, "God help me," and shot it dead. I'll read the last 4 paragraphs because they are better read than said. My mother was a devout woman who made frequent supplication to the Almighty. She was also swift in her gratitude to God for what she regarded as divine intervention. She knew that she could never explain why this and not that, because such questions were well beyond her. But when she looked at the snake lying dead in the dirt, she knew that what had happened was miraculous. From the other side of the bull paddock, my father and Uncle Charlie had heard the gunshot and come thudding across the hot earth. They found Auntie Lizzie holding on to my mother and all 3 children crying. My father took my mother in his arms and she sobbed against his chest. She was as white as chalk and shaking. Auntie Lizzie said that she would put some extra potatoes in the pot and that everybody could have dinner at her place. My mother could not know then that another snake would be sighted the next day and another on the day after that. 3 snakes in 3 days. And that the shock of her fear and frenzy would diminish her supply of breast milk. She kept on until she recognised her infant's significant weight loss and in cutting sadness sought a breast milk substitute, Glaxo. It was a number 1 tin for young and delicate babies. I still have a number 2 Glaxo tin. It is tall and round and the print on the metal remains clear. Progressive milk food for older infants. With its straight sides and its tight lid, it sits in my garden cupboard storing bloom booster.
This is called A Day in the Life. Jesus loves the little children, and I watch them starve on the internet while I eat my breakfast. I let the sun absorb into my skin, and they get buried under rubble. I log out of my phone because I need a break, and a mother buries her child, and her husband never comes back from searching for food. What did Mercutio say? A plague on both your houses. Don't want to wish ill of anyone, but is now the time? I guess I wish shame on both their houses and ours. Paint makeup on my face, and the Prime Minister does nothing. I work 8 hours to come home and scroll, ease the pain of the grind, and watch fascism seep into society. I eat my organic food, and someone somewhere goes without. I shower, slather oil and creams over my body. I slip into slumber in a safe place, while someone somewhere sleeps rough. The sun rises, I breathe the fresh air, and write my gratitudes and recite my affirmations. It's a twist of fate that it's me here and not them. Another bomb is dropped in a land I've never been. Another house is raided, parents stolen. Another child is the collateral. But Jesus loves the little children, and God will judge those who've starved them.
This story is called Witchcraft. In 1999, I was contacted by somebody from ADRA in the office in Sydney about an opportunity to go and serve in Africa with a mobile eye team from Mwami in Zambia. I'd been on a service trip with our church in '96 to Malawi, and I loved the people in the place so much that I jumped at the chance to get back to Africa. It was super rewarding to help gather donated goods for this trip from various corporations, and I remember thinking at the time, if I didn't need to earn money, if money was no object, this is what I would do. I'd only been married for about 9 months when I left for Africa, so I kept a pretty thorough diary to share with my wife when I got back. And I'm going to share a few of those little stories from that trip. As long as I can remember, I've had an interest in copying accents and making all sorts of interesting noises, as some of my good friends' parents can attest. You must try this kuyovel. It's absolutely delicious. You must. Are you mocking me? Yes, Leslie, I am mocking you. Anyway, I flew over to Africa with my friend Mark Craig, who was an optometrist at the time, and I was gifted the perfect opportunity to use my hobby on the flight. We were right up the back of the plane in the very, very last row. And with about 4 hours left of our 17-hour flight, there were 4 or 5 guys who'd been standing up there drinking beers and telling tall stories right near our seats. And one particular gentleman was telling stories at a volume that was much louder than necessary. Well, of course, you know South Africa is the biggest exporter of diamonds in the world. And I made the seatbelt noise. Doom! And his head snapped around mid-sentence to see if he had to go and sit down, and Mark and I couldn't stop laughing for about half an hour. Of course, we kept making that noise for the rest of the trip. The team we were heading to Zambia and down into the south of Zambia to a place in Gwembe. Have we got that first picture up there? It's a very official sounding place. Republic of Zambia, Ministry of Health, Gwembe District Health Board, Gwembe District Hospital. But it was a couple of rooms and a storeroom and an office and not much else. This is the little team that I was with. We got dropped down there. Half the team was left at a place called Chicken Kata, halfway down, and we were dropped down there to see whoever turned up. The leader of the team was Dr. Bowiafi, who is an ophthalmologist, very quietly spoken and only 5'1". That's the next picture. And his second in command was Mr. Bota, who was a ophthalmic nurse. And he was just as powerful, but also, next picture, around 5'1". They had another doctor along who was learning how to do remote clinics and see how it all worked. His name was Dr. Mumba, but I haven't got a photo of him for you. Our first day in Gwembe, it began very formally at the hospital with a prayer and a talk given by Mr. Bota on eye health, and also to let the people gathered know what we were looking for. There was probably a couple of hundred people who'd walked from miles around. There was no eye work going on in Gwembe at all, so lots of people. And he took great pains to stress that cataracts were not the result of witchcraft. It's your eye lens going grey. Like the coming of grey hair when you get old, your eye lens goes grey, and you should be proud of your grey hair so you can be proud of your cataracts. Don't be frightened. Come and see us. It is not witchcraft. Later I told Mr. Bota how much I enjoyed his talk, especially the part about it not being witchcraft, and witchcraft, of course, became a catch cry of the whole trip. Things that went on to be considered witchcraft by the team was me speaking in a Zimbabwean accent. No, doctor, you cannot do that. Must not. I've never seen the like of that. And all my other things like, that's witchcraft. As well as Mr. Bota, he spoke 21 languages. And one of the team at lunch said, one man to speak 21 languages, that is witchcraft. And one other thing that came up was Mark, in between seeing patients that he was doing his optometry work on, he would always wash his hands on a little wet wipe. And he kept pulling these wet wipes out one day, kept pulling them out, washing his hands, pulling them out. On the third day, he keeps pulling these things out and they're going, how many are in there? That is witchcraft. The first few days we were there, we were doing basic triage and assessments prior to the surgeons arriving. Mark set up a couple of chairs facing one another and looked into people's eyes all day, checking their retinas and gauging people's prescription if they needed glasses. Mr. Bota sat near me and he did tonometry and all sorts of other checks, as well as prescribing antibiotic and steroid drops for people who needed them. All I could do at that time was sit behind a big desk and take the details down on a card of everyone who came in, age, sex, diagnosis, etc. But I felt a lot like Dennis Denuto in the High Court scene in the castle where he asked the QC if he would like a glass of water. My seat became known as the Mugabe seat. It was the most presidential looking in the whole joint, and I did the least work. During these 3 long days, I learned some of the local language, which was Tonga. And I was hoping to be able to tell people in their own language when they should come back and be seen by the doctor. Mugabole zona means come back not tomorrow, but the next day. One woman came through and she wasn't really speaking much, and I thought, here we go, I've got this. And so, hoping to have an entire conversation with her in Tonga, I said, Izona, Mogabale Zona. And she goes, on Thursday? Yes, on Thursday. An old man came in with glaucoma changes, and he had loss of vision in his left eye. And we tried to do an intraocular pressure test in his right eye to see how that was going, but he kept jamming his eye so tightly shut that we couldn't get the instrument on the eyeball. After we'd tried for a few minutes without any success, he asked us to pray for him because he thought that God was not with him and the Holy Spirit was not in him. And he went on to say that the devil could be in him, stopping him from opening his eye. But Mr. Borta just put his hand on his shoulder and said, it also takes courage. In the end, he took an overnight break and perhaps gathered some courage, and we saw him the next morning. There was no operating theatre at Gwembe Hospital, and while we were seeing patients on the morning of the fourth day, the other half of the team who'd arrived from Chicken-Kata were converting a storeroom into a theatre. 2 operating tables, an anaesthetic preparation table, and a little waiting area at the front where they sat on a bench. So patients started their journey sitting on the bench outside the door, and once the previous operation was finished, everybody would move one space around, get the anaesthetic, walk over to the table, lie down, have their operation, and get up and walk down and stay in the hospital ward overnight. It's a little different to hospitals at home. There's no kitchen, and the patient's relatives are responsible for providing them with food, so the relatives were all sort of living under the trees and so forth outside the hospital and cooking the food outside, and it was, really moving to see how people look after each other. A very efficient team we worked with, though. There were 26 operations I think we did in a couple of days, where the average in the capital Lusaka was maybe 2 to 3 operations a week. Right. Before going to Africa, I had an intense dislike of cockroaches. It was bordering on a phobia, and my wife would say, not bordering. This trip certainly provided the opportunity for character growth, and I've got a direct quote from my diary at the time. What a night. I think this was my worst one yet. It was so hot, and the plastic cover on my bed had come into its own by making the sheets pull off the mattress whenever you moved. I didn't sleep very well until about 3:30 a.m. and woke to the sound of a mosquito buzzing around the room. That was the beginning of the ordeal. I tried to cover myself with a polyester sheet, but it was insufferably hot and I felt like I couldn't breathe under there, so I got up to see if I could find some doom spray to take out the mosquito. Walked out into the lounge room, and I think I encountered the single largest number of cockroaches I have ever seen in my life. They were climbing all through the boxes of food that we had, traversing the lounge room as if it was a theme park. I went to the toilet, plenty of cockroaches in there, 3 on the outside of the door alone. So rather than risk facing the horror that was building up in my mind, I decided that complete denial was the key, and I went back to bed and actively thought of other things. Being back at home with Emma, upcoming concerts I had to do, my end-of-year French test. Thank the Lord it worked, and I slept free of insect nightmares until the single loudest rooster call I've ever heard in my life erupted at almost precisely 5 a.m. The rooster was inside our house somewhere, and being of a concrete construction with little furniture to speak of and absolutely no carpet, the call echoed around the house like the world's best yodeler giving his all in the Swiss Championships. I'd been somewhat misled in my youth to believe that the rooster wakes at dawn, gives a crow, everything hears, and then the rooster goes about its business. Well, how far from the truth. Our friend was up well before dawn, pitch black, giving it everything he had for about 5 minutes solid. I really think he was enjoying the acoustic because he kept trying to outdo himself. He was close enough for us to be able to hear him drawing breath. He started up again at 5:30 and I just rolled over and tried to sleep through it. But Dr. Wiafi was able to give the humans the last word by slaughtering the rooster just before breakfast. It was hanging in a tree when I came outside in the morning, and I think it ended up as lunch. Now's a good opportunity to talk about the food we had while we were there. It was traditional Southern African fare, and nsima, I don't know how many of you have been to Africa before, but it's like a ground-up maize flour that's made into a paste and boiled till it's like a dough kind of consistency. So they had nsima with vegetables, and because we're a team of Westerners, they usually had some meat, mainly chicken, but always plenty of eggs. Always eggs. Always eggs. We'd been eating eggs every meal. And one lunch where I said to myself, I think I might give the eggs a miss this time. And I sort of walked past them, and then one of the team elbowed me and goes, "There's eggs." I took an egg. The team would all gather at our house for meals, and Mr. Botha was a vegetarian, and he was keen to spruik the benefits of being a vegetarian to anybody who would listen, but particularly to Dr. Mumba, who wasn't an Adventist, and he didn't normally work with this team. So this was a conversation between them that we all got at our lunch. "Botha, give me one good reason that I should be a vegetarian." And Mr. Botha said, "Because, doctor, it is how it was in the beginning, and it's how it always should be. That is not a good reason. Therefore, I will eat everything." "Oh, doctor, not even a pig eats everything." We managed to do a whole bunch of operations on these very needy people, and the morning after surgery was one of the most satisfying of the whole trip. I did rounds with Dr. Mumba, seeing all the patients who had surgery the night before. And when we arrived at the hospital, there were a few patients sitting outside with their eye patches still intact. And seeing people's reactions when the patches were removed, it was just amazing. Can I get the last picture up? So there was a man who walked in, couldn't see at all, totally blind. And seeing the people's reactions when the patches were removed at being able to see through an eye that until the day before couldn't perceive light at all. It was pretty humbling and inspiring. The best example was this old fellow who was blind in both his eyes. The look on his face when we walked in was one of such hope and expectation while he still had the eye patches on. And when they took the patches off, they'd hold up a few fingers to say, "How many fingers am I holding up?" Change for different patients. And they pulled his eye patches off and held up the fingers, and he didn't say anything. He just went. And we knew he'd had a revelation. Everybody was so pleased. But it occurred to me that 2 people had their life back now. Not just him, but the grandson that he had to rely on to do everything for him. It just left me super impressed with Dr. Wiafi and the work he could do, and ophthalmologists like Fred Hollows who literally can bring back sight to the blind. So this service trip and others I've been on have been wonderfully memorable for the small and funny moments that are still the secret handshake of the friendships forged, and for the challenge they brought me and the opportunity for growth that I got. And as my wife can attest, I can deal with my own cockroaches now. There wasn't any witchcraft, but there was magic at work, bringing people together for a common cause and changing the lives of people who help, possibly as much as the people we helped. Thanks.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear, And this weak and idle theme, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest puck, if we have unearned luck, now to escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the puckle I call, so good night unto you all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.